let's continue our major poses for our gallop. So we now have our first and last frame in place. Great, so now we can continue posing. And just for the remainder of our poses, as far as blocking them out, we're just going to place them every frame. Okay, we won't necessarily worry about the timing and spacing just yet. Okay, we just want to block in our poses for right now. We'll worry about that later. So we'll go to frame 2 and continue posing. Remember to keep in mind follow through and also our reference points. Where's this limb in relation to the other? Okay, and that's really going to help bring out the believability of our gallop. Okay, and keeping in mind those poses, we really got to thank people like Edward Muybridge, who has this great gallery that features different actions of different animals and also humans as well. It's a great animation reference. He also really helped out the motion picture industry, but that's another topic there. Anyway, so we'll continue posing out our horse. We now have our front limbs, okay, pretty much matched up with our reference image. So now let's go ahead and work on the others. And now this right pelvic limb, okay, this is starting to come down a little bit more, okay, or come forward, getting ready to plant pretty soon. Also going to want to roll up the fetlock. Okay, so it's about here as far as the reference point is concerned. And then we could go to the left pelvic limb and start bringing that up. Okay, so that's a little bit closer to about this point here, and then we can roll up the fetlock. Great, so now we have two poses in, and as we scrub back and forth, we can see how they're coming along. Excellent. So from here, we can work on the third pose. So we could go to frame 3, and once here, we'll continue posing. So we could go to the front or the right thoracic limb. And notice as I move my control, if we ever get this flipping happening, well, that's because of the elbow controls. Okay, so what we're going to want to do is just move them forward so we don't run into any of that flipping. So first off, let's go to frame 1. We'll middle mouse button click there. Okay, so we don't necessarily lose this pose. It's not that important, but just to get into the habit of middle mouse button clicking, we can go ahead and middle mouse button click on frame 1. Okay, and then just move up our controls a bit for the thoracic limbs. Okay, and also do the same for our pelvic limbs. Just move up those elbow controls. Okay, and both should still be selected. Okay, when if we marquee select, we should be grabbing both elbow controls. Okay, but once we have done that, now what we can do is middle mouse button click on frame 13, select both of our controls, and since we only moved in the Z, we can just go to the translate Z in our channel box, right click, and hit key selected. Great, so now they'll lock their position there so they won't be moving back and forth. And we could go back to middle mouse button clicking on frame 3 and continue our posing. So going to the right front limb, we can bring that forward, okay? And we can say to ourselves, how should our the horse's forearm, which is this area here, how should that be positioned as we see in our image? Okay, we want to constantly think about those things. Okay, so that's about right here. And as far as the left front limb, that's coming up. That's about touching or near touching the rib cage. Okay, the center of the horse. So we want to bring that up to the right point. Great. So once we have this, let's see. Maybe we can even take our right front limb and bring it out a little bit more, and also roll down the fetlock just slightly, so there's a little bit of space in here. And we could go now to the right back or pelvic limb, and as we see in our image, it's starting to come down to the floor now a little bit more, so we want to make sure that we bring that down and even roll up the fetlock for the follow through there. Really, again, getting some nice line of actions in the limbs here. It's really interesting. But now let's go ahead and even bring up the left. Notice how that's coming up forward. And right now the left is overlapping the right as we see from our reference image. So we'll go ahead and make sure we include that. Awesome. So as we scroll back and forth, here's what we have now. Great. Already from what we have, the cycle is really coming along. Excellent. So now we can move to frame 4 and continue our posing. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll select the right thoracic limb and move that even more forward. This is starting to be more of a V shape. Okay, so we'll bring that, keeping that type of shape in mind. Okay, as we can see, going from our shoulder all the way down to the fetlock, it's more of a V shape. Okay, and as far as the left thoracic limb is concerned, that's coming up a little bit more closer to the character's rib. Okay, just a little bit more closer, about there. Great. And then as far as our pelvic limbs are concerned, for the left, let's see. This one we can bring in a little bit closer, okay, and a little bit more down as it's starting to come down. Okay, for the plant. And the right, once we get there, that's going to be brought down almost to a planted position. So we'll get it closer to the floor here. And we'll also roll up the fetlock for the follow through there. We're going to get some nice looking follow through as the foot plants, as it's just about to do. Okay, we want to make sure we have a good amount of spacing in here as well. Let's see how our limb is looking. Let's see if we bring up the right a bit. Let's see how that'll look. Then we could scrub back and forth to see how our poses are looking. All right, that's looking pretty good. Maybe we could even take this right and bring it down a little bit more, translate it down a little bit more. Awesome. So this is coming along really well. Now we can move to our next pose, our fifth pose, and this is where the right is going to be planted. Now it's not only going to be translated down, but also back. Remember, keeping in mind the follow through and arcs. Especially for organic characters, we want to make sure we have arcs in our motion. So let's go ahead and zero out the translate Y. Since the horse is going to be landing now with that right foot, now have a landing pose. Great. And then since the hoof is going to be planted, we want to go to our rotate X and put in a value of 0 there. And also in the Z, move it back. Okay, just slightly, since the foot is going to be planted there. Great. And then for our left, that's coming down a little bit more, so we want to bring that down more and also roll up the fetlock as well. Okay, so this is just about to plant too. Great, and we want to check the spacing based off the images that we have. Excellent. Now as far as our front left limb, we want to bring that forward a little bit as that's coming forward for the follow through. Okay. And we could even roll out the fetlock a little bit here too, like that. And then for the right, this is really starting to kick forward and straighten out. It's not totally straight just yet, but it is getting to that point. So knowing that, we just want to match up the angles that we have in our images. And later on, just want to note that we will be animating the muscles, the front muscles. We don't want to keep them stationary. We're going to check out how our animation is looking once we have our poses in and see how it's going to look without first the front muscles moving, just to check the motion of our limbs, and then we'll get those thrusting forward and back as they need to be with their limbs. Great. So here's what we have now. Our animation's really coming along well. Great. As we scrub back and forth, and we want to do that to get a feel of how everything's looking as far as a follow through. Are we getting the right poses in there? And we sure are right now. Okay, and again, this is just a rough phase. But let's go ahead and stop the lesson here. We now have about 5 poses or so in our scene. So what we'll do is just stop the lesson here, and in the next lesson, we'll continue on this process of adding in our extreme or major poses.